Good evening. I'd like to call the February 28th, 2024 Town Board meeting to order. Ms. Marco, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Dodson?
Present.
Mr. Mastriani?
Present.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schlab?
Present.
Mrs. Collins?
Present.
4 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Ms. Marco. A quorum is present. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Griffin, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for attending this evening. We do have a kind of heavy agenda, but there are a couple announcements I'd like to make. As you can tell, we're working on the town hall renovations, and they're going to need this room for 10 days to replace the windows and do other work. So our March 13th town board meeting will be held at the Rotterdam Senior Center on Hamburg Street. The March 19th Planning Commission and the March 20th Zoning Board of Appeals. Those 2 meetings will also be held at the Rotterdam Senior Center. It will be listed on our website, and I believe there's going to be an ad in the paper also, but if you could remember that. One last thing is that we do have 2 executive sessions tonight, but we're going to hold them at the end of the meeting so that if any of you don't want to wait for us to come back out and adjourn the meeting, because that's all that would be left to do, you don't have to, but we will hold those at the end. All right? So right now we'll open public hearing number 1. Ms. Marco, would you read?
I just wanted to make an announcement because some of these people don't tell me. So when it says Highbridge Road for Calvin Road, do you mean public hearing 1?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And Tom Morgan, you say public hearing. Do you mean public hearing 1?
Yeah, for Stewart's.
Thank you. I think that's it. And Frank Hackett, you say zoning, but do you mean the public hearing number 1 for Stewart's?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I had it right. Okay, I'm sorry, Molly, I just wanted to get that. Okay.
Thank you.
To recognize the introduction of interlocal local law blank of 2024, a change of zone request on plus or minus 1.86 acres from single-family residential R1 and retail business B1 to general business B2, to facilitate the construction of a plus or minus 3,975 square foot Stewart's convenience store with 4 fueling islands. Property is located at Highbridge Road, Mercer Street, and Sherman Street, and comprises 5 parcels of property known as tax map number 59.16-2-10, 59.16-2, 9.2, 59.16-2-9.1, 59.16-2-40.2, and 59.16-2-40.1. So let's see. And Calvin Rugg is the first person.
Good evening, Calvin Rugg, 1107 Sunrise Boulevard. I live right across the street, so I'm not anywhere near this parcel. So, I guess last time I came here, I spoke about the rezoning along Highbridge, Mercer, and Sherman Street, and I offered suggestions for the site plan. So, the reason I kind of offered those up was I kind of thought that, as previous town boards have done, they've always kind of approved rezoning. So maybe I kind of jumped the gun here. So. After speaking with some residents here, I just want to let you know that I feel like I'm strongly opposed to this rezoning from R1 and B1 to B2. So the one thing I wanted to bring up is that the town's comprehensive plan lists this area as R1 and B1. The town hired professionals at community engagement to create this plan within the last 5 years. So this area could have been rezoned B2 at that point, but it wasn't. So I hope this town board doesn't go down the same path that previous town boards have done, because it's a slippery slope. Once you start rezoning stuff and eroding that comprehensive plan, there's other things in town that relate to that too. So getting into it, one of the things that I wanted to say was that some of the properties in discussion obviously were businesses before. And so realistically, nobody knocks down a business to build houses, which is probably why it's zoned B1 in my opinion. So in the town zoning, B1 has permitted uses for various types of smaller businesses without larger hazardous material components. They have small and moderate vehicle and foot traffic, and B1 allows convenience stores. B2 is similar to B1, but has permitted uses with larger type of businesses with some more vehicular and foot traffic, but not large hazardous materials. Now B2, there's a special use, right? So the special use is case by case. And so that's where the planning board and the town decides if a motor vehicle filling station is what's really right in that area. So motor vehicle filling stations contain large quantities of hazardous materials such as gasoline, diesel fuel, propane, electric vehicle fueling stations. Motor vehicle stations also promote large quantities of vehicle traffic in and out and idling of vehicles. So, in my opinion, these types of hazardous materials should not be located adjacent to a residential zoned area. Granted, there are many safeguards in place to prevent the release of these materials, but why would we rely on these safeguards instead of just not locating them next to an existing residential district? So, the one other thing is kind of related but not related. You know, there's other hazardous, large hazardous projects in town that we're discussing in rural areas. So if you wouldn't want hazardous materials in a rural area, why would you want hazardous materials in a residential area? So that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Carol Patori.
Okay, you have to excuse me because I don't know where my voice went. I'll do my best. Carol Patorti, 115 Mercer Ave. I'm again voicing my complete opposition to a zone change from residential to commercial to accommodate the building of Stewart's on High Bridge Road. The only reason a rezoning would make any sense is if this area was considered a food desert, but it is not. It is also not a gas desert, a milk and ice cream desert, a pizza desert, or even a lottery ticket desert. I have lived on Mercer Ave going on 15 years. This is a very nice neighborhood where the residents are respectful to one another. People often go for walks, walk their dogs, children and adults ride their bikes. It's nice and for the most part a very quiet neighborhood, but it won't be with the Stewarts located on High Bridge between Sherman Street and Mercer Ave. Several years ago, there was much opposition to a proposed apartment complex on the corner of High Bridge and Peter Road. Residents were completely against it for several reasons, not the least of which included an increase in traffic. I think it's fair to say the traffic that that apartment complex would have generated in a day could easily be what a Stewart's would generate in half an hour. I read in the Gazette newspaper the Planning Commission said Stewart's would be an asset to the community, that the zoning change aligns with the town's comprehensive plan and would allow the vacant buildings to be demolished and redeveloped. What comprehensive plan? They also stated that the vacant lot with 2 abandoned buildings is an eyesore. There are legal remedies in the town that could have been enforced and measures taken to remedy the eyesore. Other than that, you can't force property owners to sell, but had the lots been available for sale, I'm sure there would be people interested who would want to build homes in this neighborhood. Can't imagine anyone who looked at the vacant property for so many years whose first thought was, what a great location for another Stewart's, with the exception of Stewart's, of course. We already have a Stewart's on Hamburg Street, which can get extremely busy with the lot filled to capacity and parking off and along the Rotterdam building. In that Gazette article, Chuck Marshall, Stewart's real estate representative, said the High Bridge Road location wouldn't add any traffic along the way, that the company is not a traffic generator. He said that the company would rely on the more than 9,000 vehicles that pass through the road already. On Highbridge Road, more like 9,000 vehicles from I-890 who they're counting on to get off to stop at Stewart's and get right back on as they head to work. Mr. Marshall was quoted as saying, I think the premise people have to understand is that you don't leave your house to go to Stewart's. You stop at Stewart's on your way. I doubt I'm the only one who often goes directly to the Hamburg Street Stewart's. I like Stewart's, and I'm more than happy to drive the 5 or so blocks to get there. We don't need another Stewart's to disrupt our nice, quiet neighborhood. I'm asking that you do not approve the zoning change request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Victor Murdoch.
Victor Murdoch, 1054 Eugene Drive. Full disclosure, I actually worked on the comprehensive plan at the end to kind of help the town board push it through. And one of the conversations I had with the MJ Engineering lady Jacqueline, who was marshaling the plan through, was that the comprehensive plan was supposed to, most of the time, it's done in conjunction with zoning changes. And whether I missed it or not, have we changed the zoning to conform to the comprehensive plan in this town? I suspect not. Okay. So on that note, when we look at the comprehensive plan, which was referenced by the Planning Commission that voted 6-1 to push this through, you can drive a train through this plan, this comprehensive plan. In one instance, it says preserve and enhance the character and unique identity of existing neighborhoods. Ensure commercial growth occurs in a manner that maintains the character of the community. Maintain land use patterns of existing residential neighborhoods to preserve the character of the established neighborhoods. So there's a lot of considerations go to maintaining, when you go over to Highbridge, it's houses. I mean, they got their small little commercial thing there. That Cumberland Farms more than adequately services. I think that there's people who live there. I've been over there many times. I've never had to wait for gas. I've never been 15 people deep, waiting to get like a, bagel or something. And I think the main issue is putting that Stewart's there. It's just, again, it's a convenience store and a gas station, and we are saturated with those in that area. All it's going to do is cannibalize the other business from the other stores. I think about the grandstands down the street, family-owned business. Who knows how many decades they've been in the area. If they lose 10, 15, 20% of the business because that Stewart's there, are they done? And all of a sudden you lost the property there. You lost the business. You lost tax revenue. Looking further down the road, when they put that Dollar General, whatever they're going to put on Hamburg Street, a retail store, I'm sure Stewart's is fully aware that's going there. I would suspect that somewhere down the road, that Stewart's on Hamburg Street is going to close. Again, cannibalization. They're going to come back and say, oh, it was an underperforming store. But the big thing, to get back to the point, was specifically in terms of economic development, the comprehensive plan says update and revise definitions in the comprehensive zoning law to reflect the current needs of the comprehensive plan. It says update existing zone districts and boundaries to reflect the purpose and vision of the proposed future land uses. We seem to be kind of falling back into this Thomasone thing where, we're the ones kind of chasing the ball. We should be put together a committee to redo the zoning laws, create some certainty in this town. So when a Stewart's comes in, here's 8 places you guys can put 8 pumps. BJ's, here's a huge plot of land. We'd love to have you move up from, Villaport. So when somebody comes here, it's not like, oh, we can do all these things, all these folks who live in that neighborhood. It creates uncertainty, and it seems like, again, pushing this thing forward is, I just think, again, if you wait a year, put together a committee, have some hearings, bring the community in, redo the zoning laws in the town to conform to the comprehensive plan. Stewart's is going to be just fine for a year. The town's going to be just fine for the year. This is not like, global foundries coming in and, changing the entire economic dynamics of the town. So anyway, those are my points, and thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Chuck Marshall.
Good evening. Good evening. I am Chuck Marshall from Stewart's, as was previously quoted in the Gazette. We did appear before the Planning Commission and did receive a favorable recommendation. The board focused on traffic, so we've hired Creighton Manning Engineering, who's here tonight, should there be any questions from the board about the traffic generation from the proposed Stewart's. I do think it's important to note that this is a change from B1 to B2. It's not a change from residential to commercial, although there is a small residential component that we didn't realize was effectively a notch in the zoning out there. So I'm just going to acknowledge that I'm here. I'm going to sit down and answer any questions. When the traffic study's ready, we'll resubmit that for appearance before this board. And any other information we find along our due diligence. So I just wanted to acknowledge that someone is here from Stewart's.
Thank you. Brenda Terosian.
I'm not sure if there's too much more anybody can say other than the whole community is totally against this. This board put a moratorium on the 150 acres for the solar farm. Mr. Mastriani, you went and visited the place to see what would be losing. You put a moratorium on the battery. You put a moratorium on apartments. Why, has anybody on this board, and I already know the answer, has anybody on this board gone into the community and speak with the people? Because I did. I spoke with several neighbors there. I live right around the corner. But I want to talk to them, and I'm not getting paid $10,000 a year to do your jobs. I'm not. Election time, you guys will be around, but after that, you're not. Why can't this board? You could have squashed it 2 weeks ago. You could have squashed this 2 weeks ago. Stewart's does not need to be there. That's a nice, quiet neighborhood. Stewart's does not need to be there. As far as Stewart's saying that it's not going to bring in traffic, how do you know? Because Stewart's is not there, so you don't know. You're assuming. I would hope this board would put a kibosh on this, put a moratorium until this board can go and talk to the residents and actually see what will happen. Because once you change this from B1 to B2, which includes the residential part, what's stopping future boards from going into any neighborhood and change the zone, and then, this is what we're going to do. This does not bode well with Rotterdam, a nice place to live. You guys aren't listening to these people. And not one of you have gone to their homes and talked to them and got how they feel. I did it. So maybe I should get a stipend from the board for going and doing your jobs. I know you guys will be around when it's election time.
Thank you. Tom Morgan.
Thank you, Brenda.
Good evening. Tom Morgan. I'm not for this project. I am for putting something there because it is an eyesore. It has been for years. There was a tenant in the there was a tenant in the repair shop for close to 45 years, and then he was ejected about 4 or 5 years ago. But the point to this is your decision has to be made to whether grant a zoning change, and comprised in that is zoning. As we should know, zoning comes from the comprehensive plan, not the other way around. As far as I know, the way the law is supposed to work is that the Planning Commission is supposed to submit an application for a zoning change or a comprehensive plan amendment first, and then ask for the zoning change. We do things backwards here in this town. We always have. We go for the zoning change, and then we go for the comprehensive plan amendment after. So how did we get here? We'll talk about zoning and the comprehensive plan. The applicant, in all the papers they submitted, in one little section it asks, how does the comprehensive plan get affected or has affected this project? So they reference the addendum. Comprehensive Plan, page 1-2, discussion on roadway network and viability. Discussion continues on 3-3, where a 2008 transportation study analyzed the need for infill development. That's it. That's what they put. That was supposed to validate the comprehensive plan. Well, the first one does talk about roadway network and viability. Doesn't mention the High Bridge corridor. The second section they reference is a 2008 New York 7, New York 146 land use and transportation study. In that study, this is what it says. This study focused on an area of town that encompassed 768 acres along Hamburg Street, Carmen Road, and Curry Road. Did you hear High Bridge Road in there? No. Now let's go to the Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Marshall just said that there was a focus on traffic. I tend to disagree. I read the minutes. They did talk about left turns and right turns and possibly where to put the pumps and do this and that. And they're doing a traffic study. Not on High Bridge Road they're not, because the Kings Road Bridge is closed. So we're not having 9,000 cars a day until that bridge is open. So where's that traffic study being done? And who cares? So this is some of the stuff that was said. He wants to change all the land to B2. And his reasoning was, you can't build a convenience store these days without gas pumps. Well, guess what? Only one lot of those lots has pumps on it. Why are we changing all 5 lots? He only needs B2 on one lot. Or are they going to consolidate all that? That's not in there. Mr. D'Alessandro, the first person to speak, he said, I have safety concerns, the community surroundings, comprehensive plan, does it blend in? I'm worried about traffic flow. He was the first one to speak.
I'm sorry you're close to over your 4 minutes. I don't mean to be rude, but we kind of limit everyone to 4 minutes.
Oh, I didn't know you. I didn't know.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I just got to say, finally, that we have one chance to do this right. Just one. Because once the zone changes, we're stuck with it forever. All right? And if they're going to put something there, let's put something that fits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great packet.
I didn't realize when I signed that paper coming in that I wanted to speak. I wouldn't worry. I do want to, though, ask if anyone's done the research on how the zoning in that area took place. First of all, the delicatessen, I think, was grandfathered. And because it had been there a long time ago, it had been moved a few hundred yards when 890 was built, but I don't know if that would have affected the zoning. The gas station was a mess. that I don't recall. I was young then, so I didn't pay that much attention, but I know there was a lot of controversy about that. And those tanks were removed because there had been leakage. And I'm not sure how that would have affected the zoning. Would it be removed if there already was a hazardous spill in that area? And, but all I'm asking is that how much research has been done about the history of the zoning? Highbridge Pizza is also grandfathered. The land that Cumberland Farm sits on is also grandfathered, but as a gas station. It used to be either a Mobil or a Texaco or something like that a long time ago. In fact, my cousin ran it for quite a few years. And Casco Visca has been there since the 50s, I believe, as well. Not as Casco Visca, it was another business or building it before that. But anyway, so it's not as simple, I don't think, as what's been described because of the history of it. It was my understanding that if you change the usage, all that goes away. And so if it's necessary to change from B1 to B2, then it sounds like you're changing the usage, which means you have to start all over again. And if that's what you're doing, this is the reaction. So I don't think it's necessary. I don't understand why Stewart's thinks it's necessary. There's other questions too. The only sewage along Highbridge Road is from what Time Warner put in, which is a pressurized line. And when the apartment complex was proposed by, as somebody mentioned earlier, that that sewage business came up. And Time Warner, I'm not sure if it was still Time Warner at that time, but whoever is running that cable business now, said that nobody had notified them that there was a plan to tap into their system because they had paid a portion of that cost. Somehow that got incorporated into some kind of town sewage district. I'm not sure how that happened, but I thought it was a private development. And Highbridge Pizza paid to tap into it because they had to. Because if you're familiar with Highbridge Road, you know the corner where Highbridge Pizza is floods constantly. And so their on-site septic just doesn't function. But they wouldn't have done it if they didn't have that problem to begin with. So anyway, I didn't expect to talk, so I hadn't prepared any thoughts here, so this is just off the cuff. But those are just a few issues. And one last thing is that since this is looking towards the future, if and when electric vehicles become practical, that I would assume that gas pumps will transition to electric recharging stations, which means an additional several thousand kilowatts of power demand on the power, which has always been a question in our neighborhood. It's been good the last few years, up until about 2 weeks ago. But the 3 minutes? That's the wrap it up. So that's just another question. Would that burden us with some additional cost as far as our power bills because we have to pay for a 3-phase power system or something? So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I didn't mention, because usually we have the same people that come time after time. You're allotted 4 minutes, usually somewhere about 3.5 minutes. You'll see my hand go up, which gives you about 30 seconds to wrap up your responses. So I'm sorry if I didn't say that from the beginning. Usually people who speak are pretty familiar, but anyone else who has to speak, those are the rules. Okay?
So if you have another 30 seconds?
Pardon me?
So you have another 30 seconds? I'll do that privilege of the floor.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to see if anybody else wants to speak on it, and then I'll do the email.
Is there any?
Before you do that, Mr. Marshall, are you prepared to talk about traffic tonight, or no? And again, I think they are asking questions again about a bridge being out. You know, maybe you could educate the public and the board how these traffic studies are done and the data that you use to do these traffic studies.
I'll actually defer to Mr. Nadolny, who's actually doing the work.
Okay.
So I think it'd be better if he answered.
Thank you.
Yep, Mark Mandolni, Craig Manning Engineering. Yeah, we're in the process of doing the traffic analysis. It's not done yet. We're collecting data, traffic data that's available, historical data. You know, we've done some counts out there. We'll look to see if we can compare those to the existing counts to see how how they've changed with response to the closure of Kingsbridge Road. In addition, we've requested and received accident information from New York State DOT, signal timing data. So right now we're in the sort of data collection process of looking at the sort of worst case conditions, which would be the AM and the PM peak hours. That is really associated with the morning and afternoon commuter times. We will do a full-blown traffic analysis that'll be submitted to the town. You will then be able to review that and ask us questions if there's anything additional that we need to provide. And that traffic study will identify if there's any existing accident problems out there. We'll look at sight distance at the proposed driveways. We'll look at vehicular delay and to determine if the traffic that Stewart's will generate will increase delay to the point where offsite mitigation would be necessary for turn lanes and traffic signals. Those are the types of things that we look at based on the amount of traffic they will generate. As Mr. Marshall had indicated, Stewart's does have a high pass-by rate, which in the traffic world means that you actually capture a lot of traffic for people that are already on the existing road. It will generate new trips to that site, but not all the trips to the convenience market would be a new trip. Sometimes when I'm home, I leave my house to go get a gallon of milk or a gallon of ice cream. That would be a new trip to the store because I'm going there exclusively to the store. But on my way home tonight, I think I'm going to stop and grab ice cream on the way home, and I would have done that anyways on my way home. I'm just making a new turn into a store. So not every trip on the road is considered a new trip, so you are capturing some traffic out there, and that will be a part of the study as well. But that more robust analysis will be probably done in the next couple of weeks, and then that'll be submitted to the town for your review.
Can you also just indicate the difference between convenience store and convenience store with gasoline filling from the perspective of trip generation?
Yes, so we'll take a look at that and do a comparison between how much a straight up convenience store will generate in terms of traffic versus a convenience store with the pumps. And there are standards and guidelines that we use in the traffic world. It comes out of something called the Trip Generation Manual, and they look at other typical convenience stores all across the country to see how much traffic they're currently generating, and then they'll compare that to convenience store with and without gas pumps, so you can get the comparison of whether or not it will generate more or less traffic. We also have done some studies, quite a few studies for Stewart's in the past, so we can look to see how much traffic they've generated at other stores with and without pumps as well. So that's another thing that we can do as well, just to give the board an idea of the difference between the two types of uses that could be built with and without pumps.
There was a reference about 9,000 trips or counts. Do you know where that number is?
That came from me. That's the New York State average annual daily traffic, which is available through DOT's website. I think that number's a little high. When the individual from the Gazette called me, I think it's around 8,000.
Is that specifically for Highbridge?
It is specifically for Highbridge. So again, one of the comments that indicated that the study would not include Highbridge Road is inaccurate. It does, the analysis will include for Highbridge Road.
Right. Right now, we're looking at the intersections of Mercer Ave, Peter Road, Sherman Street, and the signalized intersection to 890. Those are the four study area intersections we're specifically counting. And then we'll look to see how our counts compare to the historical counts that DOT has on the main line, because we're also getting traffic on just main line Highbridge to get speeds, classification of vehicles, numbers of vehicles, to see what the difference is before and after that closure of Kingsbridge Road. So we are in the process of doing the study. I just don't have any answers for what the conclusions are at this point.
Mr. Marshall, while you're up there, we again heard comments relative to sewer and the fact that there's not a municipal sewer system out there. my understanding, you probably do an on-site septic system in there. Is that the case?
That is the case.
And again, could you just expand on, typical use that you would have there that would generate sewage?
It's primarily just the 2 bathrooms that would be provided. I think our Burdick Street store does not have public sewer either. Slightly less generation than that, but a similar scaled system. Our system on our store on Guildhall Ave does have sewer, as well as our store on Curry Road. Both of those actually went through the same process of, and I believe you were on the board? No. Oh, okay. When that happened.
Is there sandwich making or anything proposed in here with sinks or anything like that in addition, or is it just the bathrooms?
It's just the bathrooms. There's minimal food service preparation on site. Almost everything comes from our manufacturing plant. Can be.
I think the other big one that would be helpful for the public and for the board is, Stewart's concept on being a neighborhood convenience gas, and obviously, as we know, and we appreciate, Rotterdam does have several Stewarts, and they are located in what I would consider as the neighborhoods.
Yep.
Maybe you could expand and educate us on your model for siting Stewarts.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, as you said, it's neighborhood business with relatively high existing traffic. We don't consider ourselves a traffic generator, which is, backed up by the trip generation manual. So what we count upon is existing traffic and a neighborhood network. So the 8,000 or whatever, and again, we'll get the specific number, whatever Hybridge Road already generates, and the neighborhood that exists is what we feel sustainable for our business model. We do envision a percentage of the business coming from Hamburg Street and that store, but as someone indicated, they already go there with the lot being full. So our willingness as a company to put stores that might take some business from existing stores deals with the fact that we feel there's a void in the market and can service it. I think also one of the gentlemen right here spoke and spoke to the previous use of the site as a gasoline filling station. So we have in our due diligence come up with the fact that there were tanks installed in 1972. The site does have a spill history, so there is a contamination element built into our model where, as a self-insured company, we're willing to go in and mediate the contamination on site. So again, just kind of starting the process and things that will be shared with the town when they're fully evolved. I mean, we wanted to make sure we were here tonight to answer these types of questions, but expect a full analysis both through seeker and then in your deliberation.
So I guess my last question again, we heard some conversations about hazardous materials, it's fuel that's there, technology in 1972 versus technology today. Obviously you guys deal with all your other stations. Again, in residential areas, could you maybe just expand upon what type of protection there is now and fuel storage design relative to convenience stores and gas stations?
Yep, and again, an element, we can provide you what's called the gas installation narrative. So what that narrative provides is that Stewart's has the highest level of tanks regulated by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. That's who regulates all petroleum bulk storage facilities in the state. Stewart's accounts for 1% of all permits issued by the DEC. We install double wall fiberglass tanks, and what the tanks do is there's a brine solution in between the 2 tanks. So if you envision, take a tank and put another tank around it, in between the brine sits in there. And if the tank, the inside tank, which is where the material is stored, has even like a hairline crack, the volume of the brine is affected, and when that brine volume is alternates from the installed level, we receive an alarm both at the store and at our corporate offices. So we've had tanks that have had literally centimeter or 2 centimeter type cracks, but they don't release petroleum products to the environment because of the second tank.
Contained.
Right, and it's contained. The same thing holds true for the piping mechanisms that you use to unload the fuel from the truck into the tanks.
I think one other helpful bit of information would be, again, traffic relating to trucks refueling your tanks. In addition to that, would be my favorite one is the delivery of ice cream. And how often do those deliveries occur at your locations?
Yeah, so I can give you that piece. So Stewart's delivers 65% of all of our products from Saratoga to each shop. We deliver every 3 days. One of the reasons that we have the level of success we feel we do is we're vertically integrated. So our stores aren't obligated to order a case of dressing or a case of ketchup or something at a time. And they can order individual units of items because every 3 days they're getting deliveries from Saratoga. So the Saratoga deliveries are Stewart's products, along with certain beer, and then we get outside deliveries from Frito-Lay and Pepsi primarily. I think we are already delivering our own Coke products. We have a 60,000 square foot warehouse, and that's the area from which we do all that.
What size trucks are your deliveries?
Tractor trailers.
Yeah,
Are tractor trailers, small tractor trailers? Are they like box trucks?
There's three. The 310 truck. I want to say it's 53 feet, but again, I think the same. I think the fuel tank is 53 feet, and I want to say the 310 truck is 42. But again, I can provide those specifics.
Yeah, just general information.
Yeah, no. Again, I got it, and we can do a comparison of what our trucks will add as far as like a volume percentage relating to the existing trucks on the road.
Mr. Marshall, a couple questions. Stewart's is a local company based in Saratoga, correct?
Yeah.
And the footprint that Stewart's has, the number of stores, how far does that go?
We have 358 stores. We have 10 stores in Vermont. We have stores in the northeast corner of New York at Rouse's Point. We have a store in the southeast corner in the town of East Fishkill. We go along the Dutchess and Orange County borders to the town of Wallkill. And then on the western side, we have 4 stores in Onondaga County, and then up along Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River.
Okay, and you source your milk from New York farmers?
Yep. So our milk comes from 23 farms in 9 counties. It's from the cow to the store within 48 hours. And we source all of our eggs from Thomas Poultry in Schuylerville, which is 50,000 eggs a day.
And how long have you been with the company?
I've been with the company 12 years.
In the capacity that you're in the role that you're in, how long have you been in your current job?
12 years.
12 years. In your experience, in your time at Stewart's, have you guys, you directly or the company, experienced pushback from the community where people were fearful of the impact of a store would have?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of instances it's that, and my boss kind of, pokes fun at me, and I'm an agent of change, whether it's a zone change or site plan, and I think a lot of elements that we've heard tonight are elements of a site plan that will result from the zone change. But again, a good example of working with this town is on Guilderland Ave. We dropped the height of the closest light pole to the residential district because it switches, and I apologize, I forget the name of the street on the back.
I think it's Floral Avenue.
Yeah, it is Floral Avenue. We've switched from a 15-foot pole to a 10-foot pole to accommodate a concern. And again, that was the conversion of a, for lack of better terms, junkyard, which had a small residential component, and we purchased a house to accommodate the store. And again, to my knowledge, and this is not something I checked before coming here, there hasn't been any filed complaints with the neighborhood from the operation of that store because it's operated as we promised. And the employees are owners in the company, so the way Stewart's is structured is 60% of the company is owned by the Dake family, and 40% is owned by the employees. The employees have an ownership stake and have the ability to make decisions, no different than any other ownership, with exceptions. But they don't want to have code enforcement violations or any type of infractions that jeopardize the success of the store, because that's how they're paid.
Okay, and the car count data, is that accessible online?
Yeah, if you can go on, I was trying to actually do it on my phone so I can give you an accurate number, but it's a little too small a screen, and despite my youthful exuberance, my eyes don't.
Yeah, I've been on the site too before. It's a little hard to find. I'd be curious to know what the car count data is on 890. I mean, 8,000, 9,000 does seem like a lot, but
no, that number's on Hybrid Road.
Yeah, no, I know, and I'd be curious to know what 890
number is probably 15,000.
Who knows? Yeah.
But I don't think that we're going to draw people off 890. I think, to Mark's point, we are a very high 63% pass by assignment, which means you literally have to be going past the location. I use the example, we tried to put a store in Old Forge and kind of faced opposition. And in that instance, one of the questions we asked is, well, Mr. Marshall, what do you think? And I go, well, you have a water park that I'm willing to leave my house to go to. I go, despite my love of Stewart's, I've never put my kids in the car and taken them to Watertown.
Could you explain your Helderberg Avenue situation? I think there's some residential homes in there as well.
Yep.
Again, you're going to progress with that plan, but I believe you are or have already purchased residential homes.
Correct.
Relative to that store conversion?
Correct. Similar zone change. I think Mr. Comenzo spoke to it when we were before the Planning Commission, and that was at some point in time, the town of Rotterdam switched the definition of convenience store to not include gasoline. So all of the existing stores in the town that were compliant and in B1 zones switched to non-compliant, but still in B1 zones. So the Gilderland Ave store faced a zone change, and the Helderberg Ave store faced a zone change. We own obviously the current operating Stewart's. We purchased the Curry Road nonprofit and the house that's on Helderberg. Yeah, we purchased the house on Helderberg. The individual that lives in that house has what's called a life estate, and she'll remain in the house until her passing, and at which point we'll rebuild the store.
Thank you.
So, can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
I find it difficult that people from 890 won't jump off of 890 to get gas. I don't know of many other Stewart's that are located that close to an interstate. So how do you know that that's the case, that people are not going to get off of 890 to go to Stewart's to get back on, go to work, to go to Schenectady? Other than your past experience.
Yeah, but I think we're very reliant on our past history. We have stores along the Northway corridor. It exits 11 and 13. At exit 11, we're on the to-work side from the residential community that comes out of the Country Knolls neighborhood in the town of Clifton Park. But at exit 13, we're on the wrong side of the road for to-work travel. But our history as an operator just indicates we're not going to get 890 traffic.
And is that, again, more because of the neighborhood concept that you guys are after?
Yeah, I don't think people will deviate that far, depending on where they're going off 890. I mean, if they can figure out a way to circumnavigate, but I don't think, Kings Road's a number of turns away, so I don't think that it would be easy to get anywhere else in the, whether it's the town or the city.
The other question I had, is there any plans to put charging stations in this location?
There's no immediate plans to put charging stations, and I'll go back to the question about why we don't think we're going to get 890 traffic. So we have existing relationships with Tesla, ChargePoint, and the New York Power Authority. We do all of our charging through tenant relationships because we don't have the ability. We don't have the capacity to put charging in at this time. So one of the problems with charging is what's called a peak demand charge. And it's going to bore you for a minute, but you have to bear with me. When a car plugs in, the meter ramps up. Tesla has now open sourced their charging to all vehicles. You get 80% of your demand in a 15-minute period. So when you go from 0 to 100, the kilowatt hour spike, National Grid and the utilities in New York charge the peak demand, which means all the kilowatt hours that are consumed at a Stewart's are charged as if they were delivered at the 100 kilowatt per hour rate. So Stewart's hasn't done that because charges are in the 3 to 4 charges a day, and that's why we have not installed, or we do not install charging and rely on the tenant relationships. The reason I don't think that we're going to get business off 890 is when presented with the location, Tesla opted not to pursue it, but they have pursued sites at exits 13 and 25 on the Northway, in addition to an exit on the Taconic State Parkway.
And one other question. Seems that there is a resistance to rezoning these residential area. Is it possible to build a scaled down Stewart's on the current commercial property?
That's the problem, is that all the current commercial property is B1, which does not allow gasoline filling. So
I mean, you still have to rezone that part.
But that's the bulk of it. I mean, we're willing to leave the residential component. There's like a small residential component, which actually, if you look at the zoning map, it's almost not even noticeable, and I don't mean that like in jest. But to have the septic system on that side would be, as long as we could put the septic system in there, we are willing to use either a deed restriction or some type of covenant to prohibit further expansion of the commercial zone and maintain the commercial zoning as close to hybrid as the store allows.
So if I understand that correctly, the only thing that's proposed at this point in time is actually the on-site septic system in that residential lot, or is there a part of the parking lot that goes in there?
Part of the parking lot goes onto the B1, but I don't have the specifics of the survey to show. But again, we're willing to, I think at the end of the day, I see the reduction of a pump to maybe swap some of the parking and then put the covenants in place so that the zoning is almost like has a set line, and then on the northern side of the line has a covenant in place. I mean, I don't want to say it's early because we have a concept plan and that's out there, but I think the plans can evolve to kind of give everyone, obviously we would want to build a store, but also, we don't want to alienate our customers, and understanding that there are a lot of people here that are unlikely to go to the store, but we do think that we can develop a compromise, because one of the concerns, and I sit on a planning board, is that if we don't do this, there's a somewhat fear of what will happen with the unknown, and the presence of the contamination, I think, would compound that concern.
Again, I guess the last question I would ask is, my understanding that's a couple weeks before. So again, I know we have another meeting coming up in a couple weeks. I think that we probably propose to leave this public hearing open. I think that the public, and of course the board, would be more interested in the traffic information at some point in time, and maybe other miscellaneous things that'll come up between now and then.
Yeah, I always like to leave with a checklist. So the things I have as the checklist are the gas installation narrative, the contamination history, the delivery truck plan from Stewart's, and then separate document coming from Creighton Manning is the traffic study.
Is there a specific submission date prior to that meeting that we need to hit for a traffic study?
No, I think the only thing that we're offering is, again, we would have the ability to have this public hearing continue in 2 weeks, but I don't think that's going to be appropriate. We'll leave it open, but of course we would need more information, and I think the public needs more information before we move on and get into this session again. So we're okay. I think we have a meeting, Molly, the 13th, and then this is the 27th.
Yeah, so we'll shoot to be back at the 27th.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll shoot to be back by the 27th, and we'll get everything between the 13th and the 15th to you. Very good. Thank you very much.
Can we ask questions?
Oh,
Can we ask? Yeah.
you know what? I don't think it's a good idea for, right, I do this, I joined a golf league instead of, I joined a planning board instead of a golf league, so what I'd like to do is after the fact, I'll go outside and you guys can all give me your addresses, and what I'm willing to do is have a meeting with you guys and us so that we can answer all the questions that you have.
Why can't you just answer it now to the residents?
That's what this hearing's for.
Because this is a public hearing, this is a public hearing, we want to keep it in the format of a public hearing at this point in time. Public hearing is, the board needs to get information from our public, which you guys have stepped up, and we need to hear that. In addition to that, we need to hear the other side, which we have, okay?
Now, he needs to hear the questions from the residents.
That's not at this time, okay? And he is offering again to have a meeting independent of this. We will, in a month, I believe, reconvene this public hearing. We'll have a lot more information at this point in time, more questions. In the end, we want to vet it all. But until we get more information at this point in time, we're not going to continue to proceed.
Okay, so the town members, you guys, can ask questions to them, but the residents who live there cannot. Plus, I couldn't understand what you were saying, what the other dude was saying, and what they're saying, because you're not talking loud enough.
So in the end, again, it's a public hearing. We've had the public hearing. We've taken comment from the public. We've taken some comments from stewards. I'm going to make a motion that we...
Is there anybody in the audience that didn't speak on public hearing number 1 and forgot to sign up before we take a motion? Yes.
Elizabeth Knight, I'm at 107 Mercer Ave. I'm right next door to where the property would be, or the stewards would be.
I didn't get your name, I'm sorry.
Elizabeth Knight. Thank you so much. You're welcome. So as an aside, I touched base with a realtor just to find out how this would affect my property value moving forward. And she said it would definitely lower my property value and it would take a longer time to sell my home. She said eventually it would probably sell. And when we moved there 5 years ago, we planned on, we've been putting a lot of money into our house. We're planning to retire there, and just having something like this next door to us is very frustrating to me. I don't see how traffic cannot come off of the highway and not affect us. It's right next to a highway. We already have so much noise from the highway as it is. It's ridiculous to me. We're getting older, we're not young people. It's going to make safety an issue. It affects everything in that area. It's not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who hasn't spoken yet on public hearing number 1 but would like to speak before we did get one email in that has to be read into the minutes?
Just one quick thing. I know Stewart's is not a destination. If I need non-ethanol gas for my stage 2 mowers, guess where I go? Stewart's. A friend of mine loves their milk. Destination? Stewart's. Oh, ice cream's on sale. Destination? Stewart's. So, they're full of baloney.
Thank you.
Okay, this is an email from Robert Gigliardi. Good evening, board members and neighbors. I ask that you remember all votes pertaining to the stewards proposed on Hamburg Road. Should be in the best interest of all residents of the town, not just the not my backyarders. The 5 properties have sat dormant for years and look a mess. The price is out of reach for most to obtain the land and ultimately clean it up. In my opinion, that location fits perfectly for Stewart's and also fits into the town comprehensive plan by utilizing the I-890 corridor. Stewart's is also known for nice new buildings and keeping the properties clean and safe. They are also going to contribute to the commercial tax roll, which is vital to the town residents. As far as traffic goes, I don't think there will be any major increase, as most people that utilize convenience stores do not or do so in their travels to and from where they are already going. I heard some feedback from the opposition, and what I see from the site plans is there is actually a very large setback from the property lines to the closest residential homes. If I was to suggest using anything as an example, it would be the Stewart's on Gilderland Avenue. The lighting at that location stays within the property, the building is nice, and property is well kept. And as far as I'm aware, traffic has not changed. I also hear it's a great place for town code enforcement to enjoy sitting for a few cups of coffee. Some people on social media have asked, how will this affect the ice cream place on Highbridge Road? I say it won't, since it's also for sale. I will end this with saying, if it's not a Stewart's, I tried and proven local business that helped its community, then who else will be able to invest the capital and step up? God bless Rob.
And that's it. Okay. I will entertain a motion to keep this public hearing open.
I'll make that motion to keep it open, and hopefully again that we reconvene the public hearing on March 27th.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, and that was to reconvene on March 27th. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes to keep the public hearing open.
Our next is public hearing number 2. The clerk will read.
For receipt of comment on the proposed introductory local law blank of 2024 to amend section 255.2 of Article 1, Senior Citizens Exemptions of the Code of the Town of Rotterdam entitled Exceptions, Implementation of Statutory Provisions by increasing the exemption levels for the senior citizens RP-467.
Is there anybody who signed up to speak? No. Okay. Is there anyone here who signed up to speak on public hearing number 2? No? No emails? No? Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion to close public hearing number 2.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Schwab. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes to close that public hearing.
Okay, motion passed. All right, we'll now move on to privilege of the floor. Again, if anybody wants to speak, you're allowed 4 minutes, and at around 3.5 minutes, you'll see my hand go up if you could wrap up your comments.
Brenda Terosian?
Brenda, Rotterdam, and you can notice on there I put my name and I redacted my phone number and I redacted my address, since the town board here redacts applicants' vital things that we should know. First of all, I know most of the Highbridge people went. I want to thank them so much for coming and voicing their opinions. And I hope you guys take it seriously. What I'm going to be talking about, and I'll keep talking about this, is Rotterdam Water District number 5. Now, approximately 4,000 residents were not accounted for, and another 50 plus were found during the budget meeting. My question is, this board, you guys are in charge of, especially the supervisor, are in charge of the physical of Rotterdam. How can, I know what one answer is, it was called miscommunication. How do you miscommunicate approximately 4,000 residents and then approximately another 50, and there may be more? How does this happen in 2024? How does this happen? And I know you're not going to answer me, because I've been asking the same question for months now. And you say you don't want to intrude on our 4 minutes. Well, you know what? You guys have miscellaneous. Instead of attacking me, which you guys do more than once, How about answering the questions? You guys had months to give us a proper answer as to how 4,000 residents plus 50, and there may be more, according to the Gazette, how did they get missed? Now, I'm supposed to thank you guys for lowering Water District 5 bill. I'm not thanking you guys. If anything, you guys owe us in District 5 an apology. Not lowering our tax, not lowering the tax on our water. You guys made a big, big error. And Supervisor Collins, you're in charge of this whole thing. How does it, and I'm going to ask, and I hope by the time the miscellaneous comes, you answer me, because you've had months to answer this question. How was 4,000 plus residents missed in the billing cycle? How? I mean, you guys just look at me, and I'm getting so tired of asking the same question every 2 weeks. And just for your information, I haven't forgotten about Viaport. That's coming back. And also, I know most of the Highbridge people left, but I want to thank them for showing up. And I hope you took every single comment that they made to heart. And once you make a decision, and you make that decision of changing, like they said, you can't go back on it. And then you open up a Pandora's box, because once you change the zoning, other businesses are going to, Highbridge Road will wind up to be like Hamburg and like Altamont Avenue. And I don't think anybody wants that. I don't want it. And not only that, you do the change. What's stopping you or the next administration and administration after that going into a residential place and saying, oh, we're changing the zoning, so, you know, we're going to take a couple of your houses. What's stopping? I want an answer on the 4,000.
Thank you.
I think the residents deserve honesty. Some do not know what being honest is.
Kevin Callan?
Hi, my name is Kevin Khaled. I live at 1014 Hall Avenue, Rotterdam. I'm a 64-plus year citizen of America. I've lived in Rotterdam since 2009. It's been my home for approximately 15 years. I love it here. It's a good place. 225 days. 225. That's north of 61% of a full calendar year. That's how long we've had illegal non-citizens. Illegal non-citizens squatting in our community using our sweat equity without prior discussion, without prior consent, without prior permission, without even a prior vote from the residents and legal U.S. citizens and tax-supporting residents of the town of Rotterdam. The illegal non-citizens who occupy the Super 8 motel, they've brought substantive and real potential for illness among us. I recently became aware that there's approximately 70 to 80 illegal non-citizen children that are attending 4 of our local schools. To me, that seems pretty significant. You know, I consider the very presence of illegal non-U.S. citizens as an insult to the integrity of our local safety protocols. And for me, it constitutes a serious violation of my trust as a resident, and it certainly and clearly is a violation of law. Yet, this community waits patiently for a legal response, a tool of legal substance that will remedy this remarkable breach of legal integrity, that tool hopefully would move us back towards a reasonable trust profile for those who've been tasked with implementing tools to restore the tranquility and the peace that comes with the rule of law in our community. You know, I really am frustrated, concerned, and angry with what seems to be little to no progress with moving forward with the illegal non-citizens who occupy the Super 8, to an area that is not Rotterdam, New York. I don't know anything of their health status, health profiles, nor personal mental health issues that they might be having. What's happening with the Super 8? What progress is being made with a legal process to remedy this insult? It seems like our legal counsel is dragging their feet with regard to this issue. You know, I recently filed a FOIA request for a count of police and fire response to the Super 8. That was filed on February 21. If there is no strong legal instrument soon brought by our town council, Courtney Heinel, which will effectuate the start of a process in the short term to remedy the insult that is the presence of illegal non-citizens in our community.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, you're over your 4 minutes. If you could wrap.
Thank you. I'm just concerned that there's no action from legal counsel. Okay.
Thank you.
Dean Romano.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dean Romano. I'm with Rotterdam EMS. And it's been a while since I've been here, but I thought I'd bring some information to you about our EMS system, or our stats from last year, and where we're going, and ask you for some action. In 2023, Rotterdam EMS responded to 4,007 calls. And of those calls, 2,634 of them were medical emergencies, 760 were traumatic injuries, and 387 of them were psych type calls. Of those calls, 64% of them were transported to the hospital, 20% were treated and released right where they were at, and 16% of our calls were public service type things where there were no patients and no movement of individuals. Of those calls, 57% of those calls only generated revenue. So half of our calls generate revenue. And as you know, Rotterdam EMS operates on a fee-for-service type of a basis. And so I'm calling, asking you to please, we need to get a Rotterdam EMS board meeting sooner than later so that we can start to discuss the future of EMS in Rotterdam and the opportunities we have to remedy the infrastructure that we have for EMS. I'll give you some stats about 2024 as of today. In this calendar year, we've had 675 calls, 395 of them have been medical emergencies. Our traumas were significantly less, and we had 58, a very large percentage of behavioral health type emergencies this year alone. And this year alone, our calls generating revenue have been less than 40%. So it's still early in the year to really get a good accurate number on that. However, the trend is building. And so I'm asking you to please, let's get a meeting together so we can discuss the opportunities to make EMS better in town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak under privilege of the floor but didn't sign up?
And getting back to Stewart's on High Bridge. And personally, I love Stewart's. I go to the one on Hamburg Street every morning between 5:30, 6 o'clock. Heather and her staff were absolutely wonderful people. I got my Stewart's plastic mug, so I help the environment. I love it. The issue I have, again, is the redundancy and the cannibalization. There's 5 convenience store gas stations within a mile of where this wants to be sited. According to the comprehensive plan, You know, the town is looking to promote businesses in the town to achieve a healthy local economy and provide diverse goods, services, and employment opportunities and stabilize the tax base. Another bullet point, create economic resilience through diversity in the type, scale, and variety of businesses. And so this gets back to my whole point when I was talking about the whole zoning code, that it seems like we haven't moved forward with conforming the zoning code that was prior to the comprehensive plan being finalized, I think in 2022. Probably sometime around this time, February 2022. I'm more than happy if you guys need somebody to assist in that process. And I'm sure that there's a bunch of people in this community who would be more than happy to step on that boat and reach out to the community and really engage and get this process moving forward. So it's not, again, this piecemeal process where there isn't like a plan. You know, it just seems like this stuff comes up and this is what happened under the previous regime. And I think there's a lot of reason why you guys and ladies are sitting on this board today. There was a lot of discontent in that process. I think we want certainty. We want to know what's going to happen. The comprehensive plan gives us that guidance, and we need to codify it in the zoning code. With regards to the gentleman, the question I had for the gentleman from Stewart's was, and maybe this is something that you could put up on the website, people if they want to submit questions for him. Do they own that property now, or do they have an option to buy based on you guys changing the zoning on the property? I suspect it's the latter. And in terms of the diversity, my other question to them, in terms of goods and services, I mean, I think I could stop by Cumberland Farms, Sunoco, and pretty much the same Pringles and potato chips and the gasoline. It's the same thing. So again, I think we're just kind of creating something that just is taking business from one spot to another. It's not really creating growth. And again, it's disturbing what I think is a pretty kind of quiet neighborhood, except for what they did to those trees on the ramp, those poor souls. But again, I think it's very disruptive to put that thing there. But I think there's other things that could go there. And the comprehensive talks about, again, once we get the zoning out of the way, and we know exactly what's going to happen, maybe, there's still the fences things that happen and things like that. Minor adjustments to zoning where you can put a utility shed closer to the fence, whatever it might be. That we really turn the Planning Commission into a liaison to Metroplex, to the Schenectady County Industrial Development Authority. See what grants are out there. So if there's a company that wants to come in and build something on a site like that is not zone B2, but it's B1 for light traffic, without hazardous materials, whatever it is, that we can get funds that maybe assist some entrepreneur to put something up. Really, like I said, let's become the drivers instead of this kind of piecemeal approach. It seems like it's been happening in this town. I mean, I've been here for 15 years, and it seems like that's the kind of process that we've been going through. So that's my, $2.50.
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else in our audience that would like to speak on privilege of the floor? Okay, then I'm closing privilege of the floor, and we'll move on to resolution. Our first resolution is Resolution 108 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
Accepting town board meeting minutes.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. The next resolution is Resolution 109 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
To appoint Amanda Lawson to the position of payroll audit clerk.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Schwab. Pardon me?
I'll second.
Oh, second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 110 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
To authorize change orders number 1, 2, and 3 with Bunkoff General Contractors, Inc. for the Rotterdam Town Hall renovations.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Schwab will second. On the question, Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 111 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To authorize change order number 1 with John W. Danforth Company for the Rotterdam Town Hall renovations.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second? I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 112 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To accept bid and award contract for Sartoli Avenue and Kings Road drainage improvements and roadway reconstruction.
Is there any discussion? I'd love to make this motion.
Please.
Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes and 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 113 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To accept bid and award contract for generator building modifications.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second? I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 114 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To accept bid and award contract for on-call electrical construction services.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 115 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To declare lead agency for seeker review on change of zone request of 0.35 acres from single-family residential R1 to light industrial I1 for property located at Tower Avenue and Chrysler Avenue.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes and 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 116 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To call for a public hearing on the proposed introductory local law blank of 2024 to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the Town Code relating to a change of zone from single-family residential R1 to light industrial I1 for property located at Tower Avenue and Chrysler Avenue.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci's absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution 117 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To authorize an amendment to the agreement with Barton LaJudas for wastewater treatment plant improvement supplement number 3.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 118 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To allow operation of a kiosk at the Kiwanis Park boat launch by Cornell University Cooperative Extension, Saratoga County.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Schwab. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. Clerk, on the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci absent. Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 119 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To enact introductory local law 2 of 2024 to amend section 255-2 of Article 1, senior citizens exemptions of the Code of the Town of Rotterdam entitled Exceptions Implementation of Statutory Provisions by increasing the exemption levels for senior citizens RP-467.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Who seconded?
I heard
Okay.
Mr. Schlag.
Okay.
On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci is absent. Mr. Schlott?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 120 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To accept a monetary donation from the Schenectady County Disabled Veterans, Inc. for the Rotterdam Senior Citizen Center.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci absent. Mr. Schlott?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. And that concludes our resolutions for this evening. As I said, we have 2 executive meetings that'll go at the very end. So right now, do any of our board members have anything they wish to say under liaison reports? Okay. Anything under miscellaneous?
Yeah, I do. So Brenda, I got to call you to task. I know you've been talking about these redacted resumes. Actually, you referred to Mr. Amorosi's resume and application, and I'm holding this application, and just to be aware that this was redacted as all the other ones were. But I do agree with you on the fact that I don't understand as citizens and residents of Rotterdam, when someone's applying for a job, why we can't at least see their employment history, time frames. I get you got to redact their addresses and their phone numbers and whatnot, but I was curious to see why those time frames are actually redacted so that we can see when they've actually worked at their different positions. So just putting that out there, I don't know if our attorney can clarify that.
Appreciate that. That's all I've been asking. Thank you.
Is there any other board member that wishes to speak under miscellaneous?
Yes, I'd like to speak on miscellaneous.
Can you hear? Make sure you
Yes.
open up.
Dean, I know that I've talked to Mr. Mastriani, and we were going to set up a meeting for our emergency medical board, which I believe you're on, and that would be a good time for us to begin the dialogue relative to ambulance service in the town.
And also, I will be returning your phone call. I just got it today and I ran out of time.
And again, I'd like to just address Brenda again. For the record, I'd like to say that I have discussed many times, and I'm willing to do it again. This is not 4,000 residents. I continue to hear it's 4,000 residents. We can make it 4,000 residents, but it's never been explained as 4,000 residents. In addition to that, I know that we talked about there's 50 additional units. So every year we do update this based upon new buildings, new apartment complexes, etc. And between 23 and 24 Curry Road apartments came online, so that explains the additional 50 or so. I think it's actually higher than that, but maybe that's all that was available for renting at the time, because I think the apartment complex actually houses more than 50.
Okay.
So let's, now, hold on, I believe I'm speaking, and I'd like to address the 4,000 residents again. So we did have a conversation about this, and I explained that our equivalent dwelling units are a component of not only residential units, it's well over 10,000, but as we continue to do audits in the town, I explained to the staff again that EDUs are a component of both residential and our commercial users. The difference again is, if we had debt service, you would easily see those units in our January bill. In the past, we'd see this number of around 10,000, sometimes 11,000. Well, that calculation also includes, and should have included, commercial units. So in our town, I believe we have over 500 metered commercial units. Equivalent dwelling units are just what they say they are. It's the typical uses of a single-family home in the town of Rotterdam. That in the town of Rotterdam, because we don't meter, is roughly 75,000 gallons for the year. So when we looked at metered usage from our commercial units, we convert those to equivalent dwelling units. And those additional equivalent dwelling units between, we'll say 22 and 23, when we're doing auditing, resulted in those additional units, not residential as in individual homes,
They are the equivalent of the commercial meter units in the town of Rotterdam, so that they are paying their fair share relative to any future debt service that we had. And of course, knowing that we're going to a capital improvement project, we did spend some time auditing. And, you know, again, keep in mind that prior to us coming into administration, our administration coming in, the previous administration changed an ad valorem tax to an equivalent dwelling unit. At that point in time, obviously, it was missed, and it was picked up during our evaluation as part of our capital improvement project.
Do any of the other board members have anything they wish to say under miscellaneous?
I would just like to address Mr. Schlag's comment about kind of our redactions here. I know generally we need to redact any personally identifying information, obviously date of birth, social security numbers, addresses. Those are things that generally people could use to either file some type of credit. That could even include things like what we see on the application here, which is dates for employment, or even dates that degrees were obtained. So we're trying to make sure that, hey, we're providing information to the community here, we're trying to be as transparent as possible, while also still protecting the personal identifying information. I mean, there's a lot of fraud. We want to make sure that we're protecting our citizens here. So that's why we have some of these redactions. I hope that kind of helps to answer some of your questions.
No, it doesn't. Because some of the, I'm sorry, some of the applications, they're what they get paid for is a certain amount plus what their experience is. On all those redactions, I'm sorry, you can bang all you want. On those redactions, we don't know when they went to high school, when they graduated from college. Who the hell's going to use that?
I want to know if there's any other board members that have anything they wish to say under miscellaneous.
You guys are about as transparent.
Then do I have a motion for this board to go into executive session for the personnel matters relating to employee 02142024 with invited guests Nathaniel Nichols, Esquire, and Mr. Larry Lamora, and then our second executive session is personnel matter relating to employee 02282024 with invited guest Nathaniel Nichols, Esquire.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion was made by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Gucci absent. Mr. Schlag?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent. To go into
Motion
executive session.
passes, and we went into executive session at 8:35 p.m.